I know coca leaves don't grow here in Austin. I think we've done a pretty good job as a country with regard to making certain that the feed chemicals are not available in the drugstores, or fertilizer with regard to methamphetamines. I don't see any poppies growing, and probably even marijuana is difficult to grow. You know where I'm headed with this. My suspicion is it is brought in by more organized, older groups.
The government of Mexico, since President Calderon took office, has staged an extremely aggressive campaign against the cartels. As a result of him doing that, he's upset the balance of power within the cartels, and as a result of that, violence has erupted. In fact, it's arguably the deadliest conflict that Mexico has ever undergone. We are seeing more attacks on the federal police and local police in Mexico and the military. We're seeing use of IEDs, car bombs, grenades, of course the beheadings, hit-and-run attacks, cloned police and military vehicles. We regulate an industry that we can't regulate. How in the world could we ever regulate cocaine and heroin? It's just incomprehensible that we could do this.
We all actively understand the importance of pooling our resources, sharing information, and leveraging the talents and different skill sets of the different departments to make the biggest impact with our resources.
You would hope that with the seizing of drugs, you'd have less money going back because there'd be less drugs coming in. But what we're seeing is more seizures and more money. So I don't even know if we're making a dent in what's happening here. Commissioners, questions?
It's all about the money, you know, and juveniles are not, you know, they're not immune to it either. So if that makes any sense. I don't have answers. I wish I did.
We appreciate you coming back, and we'll ask you to be back in 6 months and anticipate a more rosy scenario then.
The Central Intelligence Agency has a long history of running drugs into the United States. In 1996, Representative Juanita McDonald of the U.S. Congress held a hearing on this. A LAPD narcotics detective named Mike Rupert spoke. He pointed out Operation Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower, which described how the CIA would work with Nicaraguan Contras in order to bring drugs into California, that then gave those drugs freely to Freeway Rick Ross, who started the Crips gang. He was allowed to basically spread the coke and crack throughout California. It started an epidemic. Just recently, in 2007, a jet crashed over Mexico. It was carrying 3 tons of cocaine. It was a known CIA plan that had been used in CIA clandestine operations. Additionally, a DEA agent by the name of Celi Castillo, who was recently in prison for selling firearms at a Saxon gun show here, he also blew the whistle on DEA and CIA involvement in drug running as well. He was stationed here in Austin, Texas. So I just want to let you guys know you're always going to the federal government for help, but the federal government doesn't always have our best interest at hand. So I'd like to make the argument if we simply decriminalize marijuana, there's no need to regulate it like Agent Thrash says would be necessary. I believe we will drop the incentive for the drug cartels. They'll immediately lose a lot of their power that they have in Mexico because the price of marijuana on the street will fall drastically. Additionally, this troubled youth, there will be less crime involved in selling marijuana, and there will be less incentive for them to get involved with the gang as a protection, like the mafia does to protect each other when they're doing their drug trade.
I'm not from Austin, so I don't pretend to know all the issues down here, but I did go to undergrad and grad school for law enforcement. I did an internship with San Paul Police, and the drug war was the big thing that convinced me not to go in that profession. A lot of you have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution. To me, it's a piece of paper, but to you guys, if you guys swear to uphold this thing, it's probably the biggest thing that has eroded the Constitution. Talking about Fourth Amendment rights, Posse Comitatus Act, we saw what happened up in Waco. Back in the 90s, they had a tank up there because they had supposedly were making drugs up there. So these are things that are happening under your guys' watch.
Ultimately, and most importantly, this comes down to self-ownership. I own my body. I have a right to decide what goes into it. If I hurt you, I'm responsible, whether I'm sober or not.
And so for you guys to use the force of the state to put people in prison and destroy families, that's violating their rights. That's essentially saying you guys, we're just slaves because you guys have a right to control what we can and can't put inside our body. You guys are each individually responsible for your actions. The DEA, the ONDCP, all these clowns put whatever they want on a piece of paper, and a higher up with more metal on their chest can tell you to arrest people for doing things related to drug war. But as long as there's no victim, you guys are violating those people's rights when you put them in a cage. They're peaceful individuals. And ultimately this comes down to freedom coupled with responsibility. We should have the freedom to act so long as we're responsible for our actions.
The small problem that Austin faces with regard to gangs is a direct result of the drug war. The DEA is the primary agency charged with the impossible task of getting drugs off the street, which is exactly what he corroborated, that fact that the prohibition is the problem, and it's something that we will never solve. All it does is suck billions of dollars from the taxpayers every year.
We are no safer, no less addicted to drugs, and drugs are no less available to our kids. As a matter of fact, drug-related violence is as high as ever. We have exactly the same number of addicts as we've always had, and it's easier for kids to get a sack of weed than it is to get a beer. The DEA is a failed federal agency. Why would we bring them in to our local problems and ask them to help us? The legalization of drugs and the abolition of the DEA would not only save the state and local governments almost $26 billion a year, but it would eliminate the black market, which is a leading cause for kids turning to gangs in the first place. We don't need another task force or more money going into failed organizations. And these kids are just getting thrown into the system for smoking pot or affiliating with the wrong kids. So many of these kids, once in the system, never get out. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind y'all that a victimless crime is not a crime at all. And it's shameful for the city of Austin to be persecuting and prosecuting all our young citizens for non-crimes. Thank you.
The regulatory piece of DEA regulates all aspects of prescription drugs, yet we have a horrendous epidemic, near epidemic problem with prescription drug abuse and kids dying from prescription drug overdoses that they're obtaining illicitly. So if we can't even control something that we regulate, how can we dare think that we can control something that, cocaine or heroin?